Another episode of Being Human. I'm delighted to say I am joined by Ben Guttmann from New York. He is a marketing entrepreneur and educator at Baruch College in marketing. He's a writer, and he's about to release, just next Tuesday, the book Simply Put, Clear Messages, why clear messages win and how to design them. Why clear messages win and how to design them. It is with great pleasure that I invite Ben to the show. Welcome.
Thanks for having me, Richard. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you on here. Absolutely love the book, as I was telling you before we came on. And before we dive into the central, simple message of the book, could you give us a little bit of your backstory, when you first got interested in writing, and how you came to be in this position that you're in now?
Certainly. So for 10 years, I ran a marketing agency. It was called Digital Natives Group. We had an office here in New York. We worked with a lot of great clients, but we started with like the local ice cream shop and the local camera shop and the local like real estate guy. And bit by bit, over the course of a decade, we began to kind of punch a little bit bigger, punch a little bit higher, and eventually landed clients like the NFL and I Live New York and the Nature Conservancy and Comcast, NBC, and all these wonderful brands. And then about a year ago, we sold the business. It was a lot of fun. It was a great ride. But, at a certain point, you do something for a decade and you kind of want to explore different things. And one of those different things is I always had a curiosity about why we do what we do, right? That's kind of like, that brings us in, that's what marketing is, right? It's trying to get people to do certain things. And that's what I do also in the classroom when I am teaching at Baruch College. I've done that for about 10 years now too, is trying to tell my students how to do that, how to perform that magic trick. And so it's one of those things that is easy to know when you're in the environment, when you're in a client meeting, whatever, like, or working on a project, like what to do. A lot of times your instincts kick in and your experience kicks in and you start to do it. But I was always curious why, and then how I can dissect that. So after we sold the business, I took some time and I began investigating this question, which is, why do some messages work when others don't? Why do some things move us to action? Why do some things stick in our brain? Why are some causes effective when other rallying cries fall flat? And it turns out that the answer is simple. The messages that work are simple. And if that's enough for you, then that's great. Like, don't buy the book. But if you want to understand like what that means and what is more actionable in the second half of the book is the 5 principles about being simple and how to make use of them. That is a more interesting. That's an interesting kind of deeper topic, and that's how you end up with 208 pages about simplicity.
Right. Yeah. And interestingly, there you mentioned moves people to action. So, give us your definition of simplicity, because I know that's included.
Yeah. So I define a simple message as something that is easily perceived, understood, and acted upon. And what that is basically saying it's easier to take something from out in the world, stick it into your head, and make sense of it. And this operates, as I looked into this, I found out this operates on this idea that cognitive scientists call fluency. And fluency, the word fluency. I know the word fluency. We've all heard this 1,000 times. You can be fluent in English or Spanish or French or Mandarin. You could be fluent in cooking or chess or football or whatever it is. But what it actually means is that it's flowing. It says something is easy. And when psychologists and scientists talk about fluency, what they're talking about is it easy? Is it easy to perceive? Is it easy to make sense of? Easy to act upon? And it turns out, when you look at the research across a host of different topics, that anything that is like that is easier to take from out in the world and stick in your head and make sense of, we like it better. We're more likely to trust it. We're more likely to buy it. And the opposite is true also. When something is harder for us to make sense of, when something takes more mental energy, makes us sweat a little bit more, well, by default, we're a little bit less likely to like it, less likely to trust it, and less likely to buy it. And that's what we're looking at when we're talking about simplicity: is how do you make something more fluent?
Right. And but it includes this idea of taking action, right, in your world, right? It's not enough for it to just because that was what was interesting about your definition, right? I hadn't considered that we might include in the definition that it's going to cause you to take action.
Oh, definitely, because that's what when we're communicating. Largely, there's two parts of it. We want to inform or we want to persuade. If we want to persuade, we want people to take action. Right? We want people to buy our thing. We want people to vote for our candidate, donate to our cause, whatever it is. And that part of the equation is often why you're going to be hiring a marketing agency, why you're going to be out there knocking doors for your campaign, doing whatever it's going to be. Uh, and that also reminds me of this other piece that's kind of one of the foundational definitions there in the book, where we look at senders and receivers, right? So I've been talking about buying, voting, donating, all these different things. I went out of my way to simplify appropriately the two different roles that we play in any sort of communication equation. And this isn't revolutionary stuff, but it just helps us strip away some of the other things that might get in the way of looking at this analytically. I say that there are senders and there are receivers. The senders are the people who, again, might be the advertisers, might be the CEOs, might be again, might be the politicians or the advocates or the parents or whoever. They're the people who have the message that want to get it across. The receivers are the ones on the other end of the equation. They're the buyers and the donors and the voters and the politicians and the kids and whoever else is the target of the messaging. And if we strip everything away and we say the senders and receivers, we wear both hats during any conversation. Like I'm sending now, you're receiving, vice versa. It makes everything a lot clearer that way. And it also gives us kind of the foundational mindset that we have to take with us for everything else, which is that the senders bear the cost of the communication. Just like if you're sending a letter, you pay the postage. The sender has to bear the literal and figurative cost of the communication. It's about being more humble in your communication when you have that perspective.
It's on me as the communicator, as the sender, to make it as simple and easy as possible.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, and for me to be fluent. And then you have these two categorizations of fluency, right? You talk about perceptual fluency and processing fluency.
Yeah,
So
and
yeah,
this is depending on who you ask in the science. There, they'll break down the idea of fluency into those two pieces. Perceptual fluency is largely about the uh, can you read it and see it, and do your senses pick it up? And I mentioned some studies in the book, which there's examples of. If you have text in like a blurry typeface, right? Uh, it is harder for somebody to see it. It takes a little bit more work for them. And that decreases the fluency and decreases all the other things that are the knock on effects from them. And on the processing fluency side, it's about making sense of it, right? And so, are using language that is uh, more easily understood, simpler language. Are you avoiding kind of jargon? Are you avoiding all the things that happen kind of in your head to make sense of the message?
yeah, yeah. And why do you think then? Because I mean, so often in my professional life or in my personal life, I will experience communication that is not fluent and where people are using complicated terms. Why is it, do you think, as humans, we have this tendency to not speak simply?
Oh man, we have both internally and externally a whole host of reasons that push us in the other way, right? So we just saw that as a receiver, you value it. You value simplicity, right? We can look at the science, we can look at the efficacy of ad campaigns and everything else, and we see that simpler things work better. That's what we want. But when we're in the driver's seat, when we're sending, it's really hard. And there's kind of a series of studies from Leidy Klotz and his colleagues at University of Virginia that I reference in there that show what they call an additive bias. whenever we are tasked with making changes to something to improve something, quote unquote, our first instinct for most of us is to add. It's not to subtract. We want to add more words. We want to add more stuff, add more pages to our website, add more slides to our presentation. All these things are the easy route for us because they're visible, right? We see them. It's just, we don't see removing things a lot of times. They do studies where there's one that's kind of the foundational piece where they take this little like Lego structure and they set it up and they ask students to come by and adjust the Lego structure to make it be able to balance like a brick on top of it. And the easy solution, the proper solution that uses the fewest number of moves to do that is to remove one block. But instead, what most people do is they add 4 or 5 blocks to build another support for that structure. And they do the same type of experiment when they look at like a mini golf course, when they look at a vacation itinerary, when they look at even just kind of patterns of squares and whatever, to ask somebody to say, hey, make this symmetrical or make this more efficient, make this whatever. The default is for us to add. He has a book that came out last year called Subtract. I recommend it. It's very good. And so that's one of the things that's going on in our head. And on the outside, in our workplaces, in everywhere else that we're doing that type of messaging, is we have what we see as a series of structures that push us towards more. There's evidence, again, of my addition. There's not evidence of my subtraction. People get awards for building a bridge. They don't really get so many awards for taking a bridge down. And that applies at like the resume level, that applies at the boardroom level, that applies in like the PR level, is people will notice when you build something. They don't so much notice when you maintain something or when you remove something. And so there's that. But then it's also it's hard because it's scary a lot of times. We will use big words to hide behind. We'll use extra language, extra fluff, extra paragraphs and slides and whatever as a shield because sometimes we're not so confident in either our own abilities or in what we're saying. And we just say, hey, you know what? If I filibuster enough, if I talk long enough in this meeting, and I use a bunch of kind of buzzwords and throw stuff out there, the client will feel like they heard what they needed to see here without actually getting anything out of it. So it's internally it's tough, externally it's tough, and we have to intentionally work on becoming more fluent, simpler in our messaging.
Right. And there was a couple of other things I picked up that this may have an evolutionary origin in us wanting to save for the winter, right? There's just something in us that wants to acquire and add to our pile that goes
Oh
pretty
yeah.
deep.
Well, we're the same kind of monkeys that have been around for 250,000 years, right? We haven't changed that much. If you took, our great 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 grandfather and you brought him here today, bring him to a doctor, it's the same person, right? But the the world in which we live in which we operate in, is a lot different. If you look back a few 100,000 years, a lot of things wanted to eat us, and we need, and we don't know where the next hunt is going to come from. If we look back even a few thousand years, we'll say, oh, you know what, there's going to be some famine in the village, and we don't know if we're going to be able to survive. And so we lived in a world of great uncertainty for a very long time. And this plays out as something like our messaging. This is the same type of thing that plays out when you look at like why we like sweet things a lot, is because we only had sweet things so much, right? If you went and you got that berry or that apple, that was like, oh wow, this is like a rarity. I need to get a lot of it, and so we would stockpile that.
Yeah.
And that's why today, when you walk by in the grocery store and you see a candy, you're like, ooh, I want more of that, and so you have more candy. So that same mechanism plays out in our messaging, and in the way in any place which we want to collect things and aggregate things, is that we stockpiling and adding is our base nature.
Yeah. Yeah. And what I also found interesting was that when researchers gave people permission and said, oh, by the way, it's okay to take things away, like people were more likely to then take a subtractive approach.
Oh yeah, so that's the other side of the coin in those like Lego studies or those different ones I mentioned from Leidy Klotz is as soon as you tell somebody that it's an option, the the responses skyrocket in terms of saying, "Oh, I guess I could remove." It's because of this idea of availability, and think of it like if you open up a closet, the things that are most available to you that you see are the things you're going to go and wear. Right? You're going to wear that shirt that's right in front of you, as opposed to digging through the back of your closet, opening up some bins, and figuring out something that's been hiding there for years. That is less available, less accessible, and so you're less likely to use it. In the same way, if you make addition is always visible, right? You can always see the results of it. But if you make subtraction visible and you make it available, then we're more likely to pick up that tool in our
Yeah.
mental toolbox and use it.
Yeah. And I was thinking of how any one of us could give ourselves consciously give ourselves that permission, right? When we're looking to send that email to our boss or to a team member or whatever, it's like, can I give myself permission to take 50 words out of this or whatever it might be?
I mean, I think that's a great idea, right? I think that if you make that part of your workflow and you say, "Hey, we're gonna," before I send the email, can I remove a sentence from it, right? And I've known people that have had, I've been guilty of this too, put a lot of exclamation points in email sometimes just because it feels more friendly. And you do that, and then you go back through and you remove a couple of them because you're saying, "Okay, well, this is too many exclamation points." But I think that same model could work with a lot of things.
Yeah. Yeah. And as I was reading that, I mean, just generally what came out of the book was when I think about the success of Twitter, or I suppose now X is because it forced everybody right into a level of fluency. Is that would that be your hypothesis here?
Yeah, there's a quote that's often misattributed to Mark Twain, which is, I wrote you a long letter because I didn't have time to write you a short one. And Twitter, when it was launched, had a limit of 140 characters, which was actually a technical limit because it was originally an SMS platform. But I don't know how many people remember that, but it was originally built as a group text messaging platform. So the idea was you had 18 characters for the username, you had a colon, and you had a space, and all of a sudden those are 20 characters, and they add 140, and the 160 characters makes up what the data limit is on SMS, which if you go all the way back to what it is. So it was this physical constraint in the world, and then that ended up uh, kind of echoing down to what the platform ended up being with 140 characters. And in that small canvas, we saw a lot of people develop entirely different ways of communicating, right? You saw like the hashtag was a user generated thing, the @ symbol was a user generated thing, the RT, which became retweet, was a user generated thing. And all of those tools, plus obviously the like kind of the writing style, the more kind of staccato, um, uh, stoic, like not so much stoic, but austere kind of writing style that
Mm.
makes sense in Twitter, shaped a lot of the rest of the language that we use in the web today. Twitter eventually, a few years ago, bumped it up to 280 characters, which people complained about at first, but then eventually they realized that's probably a little bit better because sometimes the constraints can be too much, right? And I talk about that in the same chapter, which is a little bit of constraint and a lot and like no constraint are both equally bad because a little
Right.
bit of if you have too much constraint on your time, you have a deadline, you give me a deadline for something and it's due tomorrow, we say, well, shit, I don't have time to do this, I'm just going to copy and paste something else that I did before, I'll use a template, I'll do whatever the easy thing is. If you tell me that the deadline is in a year from now, well, that's not my problem. That's future Ben's problem, right? I don't have to deal with that. And so, the middle ground, kind of a medium amount of pressure is the studies show that that is where we are most creative, most productive. And so that applies to something like Twitter, right? So something like 280 characters actually ended up being kind of the most productive platform for it, or most productive model for the platform. And now the whole company's falling apart. So it's a whole different environment. They increased the character count to several thousand, and lots of other things are going wrong over there. But I think that we do lose something when we don't have that type of tool.
Yeah. 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 Um, the other thing that you cite in the book, which I enjoyed, was our the Dunning-Kruger effect and our tendency as human beings to overestimate our ability. Talk to that a little bit and how it applies to writing.
Oh yeah. So the Dunning-Kruger effect is kind of this famous overestimation problem pit that we fall into, and I also relate it there to the illusion of explanatory depth, which is this other idea, which goes back to saying, well, I think I know something, but until I explain it, I realize then I don't really know it. So the studies that found it, that established this idea, they asked people like, how does a flush toilet work? How does the Supreme Court work? How does the odometer in your car work? And everybody says, oh, I know, I understand how these things work. And they write down, 9 out of 10, I believe, I understand it. And then they say, okay, well, go write it out. Go write a memo explaining how the flush toilet works. And everybody goes and they do that, and they can't do it. And because we think we understand a lot of things, we don't actually understand nearly as much as we believe we do. And so after they write down that description of how the toilet works, the researchers come back and say, okay, well, how much now do you believe it actually works? Or how well would you rate your knowledge right now of this tool? And everybody decreased their understanding. And anybody who's been in a classroom or has written something or has had to give a presentation to a colleague will understand that, like, this is an example of, you don't really know something until you have to teach it, and then you start to understand it. So the Dunning-Kruger effect is another example of this, of our overestimation of ourselves. And we were talking a little bit before the call about the statistic, which you love in there, which is 12% of British men think that they can take Serena Williams in a tennis match. They think they can score a point on her, which also happens to be the same percentage of American men that believe they could take a wolf in a fight. So a lot of us believe things about ourselves that aren't 100% true. And all of this whole section, by the way, is part of the first chapter in the book, which is our stupid brains in our busy world. And the idea is we have these flawed, mushy, 250,000-year-old brains, which are really good at certain things, but they're not so good at other things. And this is all about making the case for why simplicity is a necessary principle for our communication.
Right. And so so this applies to, presumably, we think we're great communicators, we think we're great senders, but we're not nearly as good at sending a message and having that message being understood and likely to be acted upon as we think we are.
Certainly, yeah. The one of the principles in the book, I talk about empathy, and the way I define it in this context is: are we speaking the same language as the receiver? Are we literally using words that make sense to us and make sense to them? Are we meeting them where they are in terms of their emotions, their state, their motivations? And the best way to do that is often to kind of get out of your bubble and test your messaging, because we are all in our own little bubbles. We think we aren't. And there's a host of different studies. Some made it into the book, some didn't make it into the book, where you look at different researchers and they say, well, okay, well, there's one for the one I think that didn't make it in, that was about Yahoo. And I'm going to butcher some of the numbers on it, but Yahoo was having problems with some of its software. People weren't liking it, and so they asked people, to go test it. And all the internal testers gave it great high reviews because they're like, "Oh, Yahoo's great. This is it." And all the external testers gave it bad reviews, right? And well, you know what? Because you're in your bubble, it's like my team, your team. I'm waving the flag for it. I understand it. Everybody else should understand it. We do a pretty bad job of understanding other people, and to the point before, we overestimate the extent to which we understand other people. We have to go talk to them, right? We have to. You can do things like go hire a marketing agency and do a big, giant focus group and all this other stuff, or you can just do something as simple as leaning over to somebody who might work in your office who's like your target market, or finding somebody that that if you're targeting men ages 65 plus, go find your grandpa, and go talk to them. They're going to have they're going to have better insight than just talking to the other 20 or 30-year-olds that you're working with.
Right. Yeah. And yeah, assuming some humility. It sounds like there's a couple of hacks here that are emerging for me. Right. One is asking myself that question: can I make this shorter? Yeah. How can I? Can I make this shorter? And can I test this? Right. Yeah. Who can I test this on?
And so the shorter thing is interesting. So one of the other principles in the book is minimal,
Yeah.
and that's at the end of the book, and it's on purpose there because it's about, is it everything you need, but only what you need? It's
Mm.
not about just cutting things out for the sake of cutting them out. What a lot of folks think, and this is probably the biggest misconception when I talk about simplicity, is it's not about having the fewest number of words or sentences or paragraphs or pages or whatever. It's about having the least amount of friction. And this is something that comes from like a user experience background, which is, it's often, if let's say you're doing a survey, it's more effective if you're designing a survey that has several different pages on it and only has a couple of questions per page than one giant page that has all these different pieces on it. Because people will look at that and say, oh, this is daunting. I don't want to go do this. So
Mm.
that's an example of more pages makes for a more effective survey. You see this on um, e-commerce sites, right? Where it's like, okay, we're going to go through several steps to get through, instead of putting in your credit card and your address and your, discount code and everything else on the same page, often it'll be kind of a step-by-step process depending on where you are. So you want to reduce friction, because every piece of friction is another opportunity for somebody to take that off ramp to go and say, I'm going to go do something else. I don't want to pay attention to your message. I don't want to listen to your talk. I don't want to go watch your ad. The average American spends 13 hours a day consuming some form of media, and in that time is going to experience thousands of ads and messages and warnings and slogans just blasted into their brain. And there's plenty of things that we can pay attention to that we are ready, willing, and able to, provided that our message, provides, if our message gives a little bit of friction, it's a reason for me to go, you know what, whatever, I'm going to go over here now. And so that's what we want to minimize as much as possible, is the moments where it becomes disfluent, where it becomes harder for us to take in the message. And so that, shorter is correlated with simpler often, but it is not actually, it's not the thing that's at the base level that we're always looking
Yeah.
to optimize.
Yeah, that makes sense. So more fluid, not necessarily shorter, or more fluent, not necessarily shorter. Yeah. Yeah, I can see that. Okay, so we're starting to get a little bit into how to write simple messages, and you alluded earlier to these principles. Maybe we should lay those out for people who are like, okay, I get it. All of my messages suck. How can I write simple messages, Ben? Yeah,
That's a good idea. So I've hinted at a couple of them, right? We had
yeah,
minimal. We talked about empathy. The 5 principles that, when you look at what makes for a simple message, what doesn't, the more you operate on these, the better you're going to be. The first one is beneficial, which is, what does it matter to the receiver? What's in it for them? Are you talking about benefits, not about features? Focused is the second one. Are you trying to say one thing, or are you trying to say multiple things at once? Is this one idea? Is this 3 ideas in a trench coat? The more focused you are, the more effective you're going to be. 3 is salient. Salient is, uh, does it rise to your attention? Does it stick out? Does it stand out? Is it noticeable? And this is often about, like, when everybody else is zigging, are you zagging? Right? That's what we're talking about with salience. Uh, 4th one is empathetic. Are you speaking in the language that the audience understands? Are you meeting them where they are? And the last one is minimal, which I just talked about. Have you cut out everything you don't need and kept just what is essential?
right, right, and and that's interesting, isn't it? Because I think about my own tendency as well. Is I don't go to benefits first, and you said that first. My immediate thing is I've got this thing and I want to tell you about it, right? And I want you to be interested in this thing I want to talk about. Yeah, it's like last on my list is on how this.
Oh
It
yeah.
takes
Well,
something, doesn't it, to get? It seems like again, it's a human tendency to not think initially about the benefit for the other person.
oh yeah. Well, the thing is, we don't buy features, we buy benefits, right? This is anybody who's ever been in sales or marketing. That's like the first thing that gets beaten into your head at some point. But it has to be beaten into your head because it's not intuitive a lot of times.
Yeah.
The way we experience the world is we crack open our five senses and we say, okay, well, this thing is red, it is this size, makes this noise, and it's got, like this car has leather seats, right? All of these things are true, and people may appreciate them, but those are all features, right? Like uh, you talk about a car, right? You say, well, the car has leather seats, the car is heated seats, it's got bright headlights, it's got this many horsepower. All of those things are certainly important at some point in the purchase process, in the decision making process. But what attracts people is not the thing, but it's what the thing does for them. And I center this chapter around a quote from a like legendary Harvard marketing professor from the 20th century, Theodore Levitt. And what he said, and I tell this to my students every semester, I say, if you remember nothing else from our class, from your entire degree here, remember this sentence, which is people don't want a 1/4 inch drill, they want a 1/4 inch hole. They don't want a 1/4 inch drill, they want a 1/4 inch hole. We don't want the thing, we want what the thing does for us. Right? Nobody has ever really wanted the drill. They really want they want the hole. And you can actually take that a bit further and you can say, well, I don't really want the hole. I want the picture up on the wall. And I don't want the picture up on the wall. I want to see my family and feel love and belonging. And you can go several layers deep on this. The drill is the feature, the hole is the benefit. And if you just kind of ask that question, which is so what? Every time you're talking about a feature, if you're talking about the new iPhone, I just got this in the mail a couple of days ago, and it's like, okay, it's got these beautiful cameras. So what? It's like, oh, well, that means that I can take better photos and save my memories of, like my kid at preschool or something like that. That's what they're selling. They're not selling you like a better camera. They're selling you, sharper memories, right? They're not selling you a faster processor. They're selling you the joy of playing a video game on that phone that ends up being, that you couldn't do before. And so you can even, if you wanted to go even further in this, and I put it in that chapter, there's functional benefits and there's emotional benefits. And the functional benefits are the first level of what changes in the world, right? Let's talk about let's talk about like toothpaste, for instance. If toothpaste, the feature is it's got minty flavor. Okay, great. You can go and you gotta have your ad, you can say it's minty flavor, and that's fine, but that's not going to sell any toothpaste. If you say, well, so what? What matters as minty flavor? Well, it means that your breath is fresh. Okay, great. That's getting a little bit closer. That's a benefit. The functional benefit in the world is that I have fresh breath. And then you say, well, so what? You ask it again. And that's going to get to the emotional benefit, which is the more intangible piece. And it's, well, if I have fresher breath, I'm going to be, I'm going to do better on my date tonight, right? I'm going to the
Yeah.
girl is going to be happier to be around me because I have fresh breath. And so that's what you're really selling when you're talking about um, minty toothpaste. You're selling someone having a better date tonight. You're not so much selling them on, what flavor of spearmint or whatever is on the toothpaste.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And I liked your formula there. Instead of this and that, it's this so that. I thought that was
Oh yeah,
a
I
great
put
way
that
to
in
run.
the focus chapter, which was it's a really good tool to kind of interrogate your messaging, which is look at your ands and try to swap them with the word so. And you can do this with the word because, you can use this word however, or anything else that's kind of causative. I use the word so because I think it's the broadest one. Is instead of saying this and that, you say this so that, from strategy and tactic to strategy so tactic. And every time I talk about this, I always use the word "and" in it, and I have to go back and like make sure that I don't I don't say the word "and" in my own description. The reason it's important is because "and" can tie together a lot of things that don't necessarily make sense or that aren't totally related. And it sounds like a proper grammatically correct English sentence to say, well, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that and I'm going to do this. Meanwhile, they may not actually logically make sense together. They may not have that kind of benefit, feature benefit type relationship. So, what you want to look at is replacing the word "and" with "so," because if you put the word "so" in there and it doesn't make sense, well, then a red flag is going to go up in your head. It's going to say, "Hey, this maybe isn't as logically sound as I thought it was going to be. The story doesn't make sense anymore," and you're able to look at that and make changes accordingly to it.
And could you give an example of that?
Well, I think I used in the book, it was we want to increase repeat visits to our coffee shop, and we're going to launch a collectible mug collection. Okay, that sounds like it could maybe make sense. But then actually, if I say we're going to increase visits to our coffee shop, so we're going to launch a collectible mug collection, you say, well, I actually don't know if that
Yeah.
strategy matches that tactic as much. Because if I collect the mug once, do I have to come back again for it? And so if you swap it to, I want to increase repeat visitors to my coffee shop, so I'm going to implement a loyalty point system. Okay, that makes a lot more sense. That ties in from the beginning to the end.
Right. Right. And I was thinking, okay, so yeah, that makes sense. I was actually thinking about using it with the benefits, right? I've got
Oh, that works too. Yeah.
this feature so that you can attract
Hmm.
more women, right? Or whatever, or guys.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great one. That's a great one. So yeah, you could do, and just spitball in here, talk about the toothpaste. You can say, well, you have minty breath, um, you know, and you have fewer cavities. Well, okay, that's fine. Those are both maybe true, but you have minty breath, so you have fewer cavities. Actually, doesn't make as much sense. You say
Yeah.
minty breath, so that you can have a more successful date tonight.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. And you got fewer cavities, so you don't have to spend so much on dentists. Yeah, exactly.
exactly. Yeah.
And then there's salient, right? Swimming against the tide. What's how do we approach creating salient messages?
The tool that I use in the salient chapter that I think is the most kind of high leverage, effective way to do this is to embrace constraints. And we talked about Twitter before, right? So Twitter, when they had 140 characters, is a great constraint. You're able to do things in that frame because of that frame that you wouldn't be able to do otherwise because it's pushing you in a certain direction. And the idea of constraints means that you're putting some sort of boundary on your work and your brainstorming or in your output. And you're saying, well, it could be in time, it can be in space, it could be with your tools. You could, I mentioned the medium amount of pressure. That's a good way of doing it. The interesting thing about salience and about constraints is sometimes the constraints can be the ceiling, but also other times the constraints can be the floor. Uh, if you say, "Hey, I want you to write a book using only 50 words in it," well, that sounds like that's really tough. Well, Dr. Seuss did that, and he wrote Green Eggs and Ham, which became this best-selling book of all time, using just a list of 50 words. On the other hand, you could say, well, I wanted you to do 100 different slogans. I want to do 100 different product descriptions. And at that point, you run out of the cliche, you run out of the easy stuff at a certain point, and it starts to push you in a direction that is going to be off past the groove. It's not even on the same creative groove. And both of those end up resulting in creating stuff that is different. And the salience is important because we don't notice anything but difference. All of our vision, all of our audio perception is contrast. We notice the figure on the ground, and you have to be something that is standing out from that background in your messaging, in your creativity, in your output. in order for it to stand out against those thousands and thousands of other options that we have.
So is it something like use a set of constraints that others are unlikely to be bound by? And then you're more likely
that's a great
to
way to
create
put it.
something that's unusual.
That's a great way to put it. And another example of something being salient because it's different is, if you look on the bookshelf, right? Like my book's going to live on the marketing shelf of a bookstore. But if you go take a couple steps over and you look at like the self-help section, every other book in the self-help section has some curse word in the title now, right? It's the subtle art of not giving a fuck, all these different things. And that worked really, really well for a while, when every book before it was just some kind of broad platitudes, like the happy, life book, whatever, something like that. That's kind of meaningless. But when you go and you say something that's different, that by allowing yourself to use curse words, by changing the game that you're playing, well, then everybody will notice your book because it's going to be different. And those books sold like hotcakes. All these different, curse word books sold great. But then everybody else starts doing it, and that's lost a little bit of its luster, right? Every other book now has the word, this or that in the title, and we're less likely to notice those as we were just kind of a generation ago. Not even a generation ago, as we're half a decade ago.
Yeah.
The Super Bowl over here a few years ago, they had so Coinbase had a bouncing QR code on the screen, right?
Right.
And in a spectacle that is full of celebrities and animals and jokes and comedians and whatever it is, to have a black screen that just has a QR code bouncing around on it, everybody froze. Everybody said, what is this? And they scanned it to the point where the app crashed. And it won awards and this and that. It got so much earned media because of it. Then the next year comes by, earlier this year, and every single commercial has some sort of QR code in it. And so nobody cares anymore, right? So you have to do something that's going to be different in order for it to stand out.
Yeah, and I see that there. So they gave themselves a constraint. Okay, no faces, no other video, just a black screen, right? And yeah.
Oh yeah,
it's interesting. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, and they said necessity is the mother of invention. Well, you're kind of forcing yourself into a new necessity, right? A new and applying that to your own creativity. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Empathy. I suppose we've already talked about that a bit. Try this out with your granddad if that's the demographic you're trying to hit. Is that what else to say on empathy?
I would say the other thing in empathy is you want to speak to one person as much as you can, because you can't really speak to a crowd, because crowds don't really exist. You could be in a crowd, but the crowd is not so much a single conscious entity. Anytime you've made a decision, even if you've been in the audience of a big sales pitch or whatever, you made it in your own head. You made it from the single receiver from the single sender to it. And so as much as you can, when you're talking about giving a presentation, when you're talking about writing an ad, designing your website, whatever it is, you want to be writing for one person. You want to be designing for one person. It's best if you know exactly who that person is. If you go and you hire an agency and you get personas and do all these different things, but you can also just take a piece of paper, a little Post-it note, and draw a stick figure on it and stick it on the side of your monitor and pretend like you're writing to that person, because that shifts you into a mindset that will be more authentic than the everybody, big broadcast. That nobody really wants that. Everybody wants the personal connection.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot. I can think of a couple of writing tasks I've got right now where that would make a difference, and I can actually imagine myself, with that avatar stuck on my screen. Yeah, that seems really, practical. And the importance of just one, right? And then I suppose the fear might come up for people. Oh, yeah, but what if I miss this person or miss that person, and then I'm not going to appeal to this type of. But it's you're saying it's better just to focus on one, even at the cost of potentially missing some other.
You can't be everything to everybody, right? The word priority is singular. It means before everybody else. And so at some point you have to figure out who is your primary audience, what is your priority, the thing that you want to say to them first. And when I talk to clients sometimes, like they're doing a website, and they'll say, well, one of the first questions is, who's your audience? Who are the different audience buckets that come here? And there's always going to be a primary audience, and there's going to be a secondary and maybe a tertiary level of audiences. You want to design your website, you want to design your presentation for the one person and the one, therefore, type of person that makes the most sense. So what's the action you want to get out of them? And you work backwards from there. Uh, people will understand that if you're we'll talk about website stuff is the secondary or tertiary level of audience for a website might be prospective employees, or might be like government regulators, or might be media. Everybody in those buckets understands that they are not the primary audience for a certain piece of communication. If you're a job seeker and you want to go work at IBM or whatever, IBM and I didn't look at their website before this, but they probably don't have a big fat call to action button in the middle of their website saying go work at IBM, right? It's probably about some product that they're offering. And same thing, Amazon is in the US here. They just launched some big, antitrust thing for it. So regulators are looking at Amazon, but their main audience is not regulators. The main audience is shoppers. And so if you can go down, you can go get their financial disclosures or whatever somewhere deep in the footer. But that is not the primary thing which they want to communicate.
Yeah. Makes sense. And then the final one, minimal. And so we made that distinction. It's not necessarily shorter. It's about eliminating friction. Anything else to say on that?
I think that's the other big takeaway, that if anybody who reads the book or listens to our conversation here is minimize your friction. That's one. And then before I said the sender having the responsibility for the communication. The other thing I always want, I ended with this in the book, which is, how does your message actually look? And because that's an important point of friction for a lot of messages. Even if it is words that we're talking about, it is going to be likely consumed through your eyes at some point. It's going to be on your website, in a magazine, in a press release, whatever it is, even in an email. All these things are coming in through our eyes. So we have to make use of the latest understanding of how we process things that way. And this hasn't actually changed that much in the past 25 years. If you look at studies of how we read on the web, we don't read like we read in a book, right? We don't go from the top corner to the bottom corner. We skim around. We jump from a headline to another headline. It's kind of like the letter F, right? We go this way, and maybe we find something and we go down the page. Maybe we find the section that's relevant to us and we go in there. Or we'll jump around and say, hey, I'm looking for a phone number. I'm looking for a name, I'm looking for an address. And so I look for things that are shaped like that in there. And this is all of us. None of us will read every single word on a web page. In terms of advertising, none of us even see most advertising on a web page. We have ad blockers, that's number one. But also we have what's called banner blindness, which if we see something that looks like an ad, we just kind of skip right over it. We don't do any processing of that whatsoever. So it's important that you use things like bullet points and pull quotes and headlines and bold and italic and all these different tools that we have in order to make your message more visually understandable.
Right. Yeah. And ensure contrast is right.
Exactly.
Super important. Yeah. Brilliant. Okay. Well, that feels like we've had a really good tour of the book, and I just got a ton of insight, layered on top of having also read Simply Put. So really appreciate that. Is there anything you might have expected me to ask or touch on that you haven't spoken about, Ben?
This has been a ton of fun. I really appreciate the, being so thorough and digging into it. I had a ton of fun writing this book. It was a really insightful process. I learned a lot as part of it. And I hope that it's going to be something that'll be useful to everybody else that gets a chance to read it in just a few days.
Yeah. Did you ever have any moments where you're like, I wish I'd known that when I was working at the agency? Was there like...
Oh, absolutely. 100%. Right. I mean, all the time.
What was your biggest moment of that nature where you're like, oh shit, I wish I'd known this like 10 years ago?
There's not so much a single moment. It's more that every single time that you go through and you find some really good examples of something and say, "Oh, I wish I came up with that one." Right?
Right. Okay.
It's a constant. It's kind of a constant drumbeat of saying, "Okay, well, now the next time I do something, it's going to be it's going to be even better." Yeah.
Right. Right. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Well, thanks again. So again, the book is out next Tuesday. We'll put a link so people can go, I guess, pre-order it or know where to find it when it comes out. There's also your website, Ben Guttmann, T N. So people, but benguttmann.com, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And there's your newsletter on there, 3 Simple Things newsletter, which looks like you're getting an app. You're not getting an app. You're getting a newsletter. It's done actually for, which I'm sure is awesome. So yeah, they can go and get more from you there. They can get the book. Is there anywhere else you'd send them?
Yeah, so the website's the best thing. Email, I've been prioritizing that more over the past couple of years. The otherwise, LinkedIn is the best place to get me. You can go follow me or connect with me on there. Just again, Ben Guttmann.
Yeah.
And if there's anything I can do to help, if anybody has more questions about the book, feel free to shoot me an email. I'd love to hear from you.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, thanks once again. This has been awesome. Thanks for the book.
Awesome.
I've learned a ton, so really appreciated it.
Thanks so much for having me, Richard. This has been a ton of fun.
Thanks, Ben. Cheers.